to my weekly podcast, my weekly briefing. I'm sorry it's been a couple of weeks since I've uploaded something. Kind of been busy with school, catching up on some reading and with work and stuff. My schedule's been really weird lately. But today I wanted to talk about a variety of topics, one of which being my personal testimony, so that you guys have a better understanding of who I am and where I come from. Then we're going to talk a little bit about provisionism, what it is, and how it inevitably leads to open theism and other kind of heresies. And then we're going to spend the last portion talking about Trump's tariffs and what I think about the tariffs that Donald Trump has issued. So to first kick things off, I'm going to start talking about my testimony. If this is your first time watching, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. You get weekly briefings like this with me, as well as some other videos where I talk about geopolitics, what-if scenarios, and as well as theology shorts. You should be able to find that all on my YouTube page at The Student Theologian. Please check that out if you that kind of stuff interests you. Okay, so first of all, I just want to tell about my testimony. Part of the reason why, because it glorifies God, I believe, in the way that He's worked in my life. And secondly, I think it's important for you guys to have an understanding of who I am. So a lot of people in seminary, I figured out, were born in Christian homes, and that has not been my experience for the most part. My mom was a Christian. She was a very good Christian. She was Pentecostal, and she did her best to raise us up to learn about God. My dad was not a Christian. He was very abusive towards her. But my mom died when I was 8. It's a very tough, probably the toughest thing that's ever, the most challenging thing that's ever happened in my life. It was certainly challenging for our entire family. That's for sure. But after that, my dad became even more abusive. We were eventually taken away from him, placed in foster care. Fortunately, I've been blessed to be in the same foster care, the same foster home with my sister, so we weren't separated. But that was, when I was placed in foster care, that was my first experience going to a Baptist church. And that was my first experience learning about the Baptist faith and the tradition. It was my first experience actually getting plugged into a church weekly and going to a weekly church every single week, because our dad never took us to church on a weekly basis. Whenever we did go to church, it was quite irregularly, and it was always with my mom and her friends over at her Pentecostal church. But the time where I've actually gotten to know and build a relationship with the church family was in the most depressing and darkest time of my life when I was in foster care. My foster mom is really good. In fact, I still have a relationship with her. We had our differences and arguments and stuff, just like any other 13-year-old or 12-year-old would have. But she's very good. She took us to church every week. And this is it's not a Reformed church, so it's very provisionist in its teaching, but it's still built in me a love for God and theology that I haven't had before. And when I was 12, this is when I made my first profession of faith. I walked down the aisle, repeated the sinner's prayer, and we're going to talk about this later, about why that the sinner's prayer is not a very... we're going to talk about the sinner's prayer as something that is not sinful by any means, but it's not the thing that saves you, if that makes sense. But I repeated the sinner's prayer, walked down the aisle, and for a little while it felt good. I had that flame and passion to grow my faith and stuff. Okay, so I wasn't in foster care for very long until me and my sisters were adopted. And at first, the adopted family was very good. It was a very good setting for us, but the honeymoon phase ended. Um, we got in some pretty tough, pretty strong arguments, like yelling and fighting. Um, it eventually led to the point where um, the details are scarce, but eventually when I think I was 16 or 17, when my adopted mom decided to send me to an orphanage, basically. Um, I don't know if you define it as an orphanage per se, but that's how it functioned. I was, it was called Arkansas Baptist Boys Ranch, and I was there from my sophomore year to my senior year. So, because I failed the grade, I didn't graduate until I was 19. Um, so that was challenging, to have authority figures in your life constantly let you down or disappoint you or just straight up say they don't want you. Um, so I've unfortunately dealt with these issues, this trauma that's been in my life of people just not wanting me. It's been hard. It's led to a bunch of depression. When I made it, I did graduate high school. Um, got my heart broken by my high school crush. And yet another example of someone not wanting me. So it sent me further down into the sinkhole of depression. And um, eventually got to a point, I tried to do a lot of careers after that to try to find something that I was passionate about. Um, I couldn't find anything. There was a point in my life where I tried to pursue the job I think that would make me the most money, because I thought that would make me happy, and it did not. I joined the Army mostly because I was homeless and because I didn't have an idea of where I wanted to go in life. So, why not join the Army and see if that's a career, or at least if they could point me in the direction I'm supposed to go. And in the Army, I tried to fix my depression by pursuing other things. The toxic relationship that did not glorify God. Um, uh, got drunk once. Um, I never struggled with alcohol again after that one experience with it. Mostly because I never liked the taste of alcohol. I just wanted to, I guess, was trying to find joy in other things. But my time in the Army taught me a lot of things about myself and about God. Near the tail end of my time in the Army, I realized that my spiritual life had dried up, that I've slid away from God, and it was harsh. It was hard for me to accept that fact and be self-aware about where my spiritual life was going and where I was at until someone pointed that out to me. I had attended these weekly Bible studies with some friends, and truth be told, I did not have the desire to grow in Christ. I was just trying to build friendships, and I was trying to create that desire within myself to follow God. And someone, a pastor, I believe, either he's a retired pastor now or a chaplain. I can't remember who it was or what his title was, but I remember his face, and I remember what he told me one time is that I didn't seem to have a desire to learn about God, and that hit me pretty hard because I knew that was true, but I told him that I had the desire to get that desire, if that makes sense. Like I had the want to want that, but I decided I would get back to the foundations of my faith and find out what the gospel really states. So if you're a football player who's struggling to get playing time, if you're a football player who struggles on the field, whether it be dropping balls or throwing or catching or tackling. What you need to do is get back to the foundations of football and in the Christian walk. If you're struggling with with your faith, I think you need to get back to the foundations, and that's what I did. I got out of the army because I decided that the army was not my career, and again, I walked back to my hometown and tried to pursue other jobs that I felt like would make me the most money, make me the most happy. And again, they all fell flat on their face because I did not find joy or passion in any of those things. So I worked at a couple of dead end jobs. Um, and then God started to reveal to me the foundational truths of the gospel, as the doctrines of grace. When I first was introduced to Reformed theology, I hated it. I was a libertarian at the time, and I wanted God to be like me. I wanted to worship a God in my own image. And so I thought that Calvinism made no sense. I mean, I want to be able to control my own life. And how could God be sovereign when all these things in my life have gone wrong? So I had arguments with Calvinist friends. I remember having a very sharp argument with one of them specifically. And then the depression got worse. And as I got back to the foundations of my faith, I started to read through the book of Romans, through the Gospels, and I started to figure out that God is sovereign and I'm not. And I started to learn more and more about the doctrines of grace, and God has since opened my eyes to this reality. And He has put this passion of theology and preaching in my heart, and it's made me pursue this ever since. So that was about 6 or 7 years ago when I had this true desire that God gave me to pursue Him. And I've realized now since then that this is not a desire that I could have ever made by myself or done for myself. This is only something that God's done in me. So ever since then, for the last couple of years, God's put on my heart to pursue ministry. And unlike any of these other jobs I pursued, I actually find my joy in doing ministry. I can't see myself doing anything else. I can't see myself being as passionate about theology and about God's word and fighting against false doctrine. I can't find anything else to do in my life that I would be more passionate about than that. And that's what God's done in my life. I can remember points in my life where I used to brag about sin. Now I hate it. I hate my sin. And I have a desire to truly serve God. Two desires that I have never had before. So I think that as I've discovered Reformed theology, that God's, by His grace alone, has saved me in this. So I don't think that walking down the aisle and repeating the sinner's prayers is what saved me. I think it was by God's grace alone. And I think this is something that provisionists get wrong in their theology. They think that God is waiting for a response, whereas God's actually doing the work in us. God does not take us to the altar kicking and screaming. Rather, He transforms us from the inside out, making us born again. Which again is what Jesus tells Nicodemus in John chapter 3, that you must be born again. And we cannot make ourselves be born again. It's only something that God does. Those are provisionist doctrine that teaches that Jesus is up here waiting for a response, waiting for us to walk down the aisle and repeat the sinner's prayer. But when we actually grow in our faith and we realize that's not the way the gospel works, we realize that provisionism is nothing short of a false doctrine. People can be saved inside provisionist churches despite their false doctrine. They just don't have the realization quite yet that it's not their walking down the aisle that saved them. It's not their repeating the sinner's prayer that saved them. It was only God's grace inside them that saved them. So we are called to have that faith, that walk of faith. But the only way that we would ever have that walk of faith is if God transforms us, if God regenerates us. Now, provisionism, once you back it into a corner, it is open theism because it teaches that God responds and changes in accordance with human responses. Um, and that's the entire theology that's built around altar calls. People like Charles Finney, um, Billy Graham, they mastered the art of doing these altar calls. And my experience with this is not unique. I know a lot of people that I've talked to um, in seminary and in my church back home who've walked down the aisles and repeated the sinner's prayer only to find out that nothing actually changed. It can give you a fire for the Lord that lasts a short time, but once life starts getting you down, things start happening in your life, you find yourself completely backsliding from the faith, and then you come under the realization that you did not make a true profession of faith at all. It's not to say that there's no one who's truly saved in these provisionist churches. Again, you can be saved in these inside these provisionist churches despite their false doctrine, despite their false theology. But as you mature, I think you'll start to gravitate towards correct theology. And there's a lot of people that I know that were saved in provisionist churches, but as they mature to a more Calvinistic theology, and that's been my experience. And I'm not perfect, but God's still working on me as I pursue this call of ministry. Now for a quick update about my seminary. Like I've said before, I've had to catch up on a lot of reading lately, and it's been good for the most part. There's one book that one of our professors is having us read that I'm not really a fan of, but I might go into that in a different upload. Went to a singles mixer a couple weeks ago. I met a lot of great people. I don't think I met my wife there. I added one woman on Facebook, but she hasn't responded to me yet, so yeah, probably not going to find my wife there. I'm still working through trying to find my wife. It's just been hard with, and it seems like every single crush you have rejects you, but I know God's working out something with that, and in God's timing it'll happen. Continue to pray for me to find a wife. Continue to pray for me to do well at seminary and my job, and that I would have discipline and time management skills to push through the end of the semester. I am going to be still in Louisville over the summer. I don't have a choice since I work. They're not going to give me the entire summer off. So I am taking a summer class that's going to be about the nature of Christ. So that's going to be really interesting. I can't wait, and I am looking forward to taking that course. All my professors are really good, are really biblically sound professors. Now we're going to get to the last portion of the upload today, and I wanted to talk about Trump, something that I know that I am not completely a mastermind of, and that's geopolitics, more specifically Donald Trump's tariffs. So what do I think of Donald Trump's tariffs? I think that, again, I don't know all the details of how tariffs work and whatnot, but I do know that every single country, almost every single country on earth, uses them. So my question is, if tariffs are so bad, why do all these countries continue to use them? And then I have a chart that I've seen for example, where these countries charge these high tariffs against America, um, and they've been doing so for decades. And now what Trump, I think, is doing is trying to balance that out. So if a country taxes 20% on U.S. imports, we're going to tax 20% on that country's imports. And you want to say balanced equation, and reciprocal tariffs on every single country that we trade with. That's what Donald Trump's plan is, and it's going to take some time to see if his plan actually works. Truth be told, the tariffs is a gamble. In the short term, it could lead to some bad inflation and economic recession. And that's only if these other countries don't cave. If all these other countries decide, hey, we're not going to trade with America under these deals. Then, if that happens, we're going to suffer some short-term economic loss. But if we do, then eventually, but if we follow that road, if that happens, then I think in the long term it could be good because it set us up for a self-sufficient future. Now, do I think that's going to happen? I don't think every single country on earth is going I don't think every single country that we've launched tariffs against is going to say no to us. In fact, there's already been reports of several different countries making deals with Donald Trump to equalize these tariffs or to cut them down. So we already have a bunch of countries that are doing this, reportedly. So I don't think that this is going to have the kind of economic impact that the left thinks it's going to have. And I do support Trump's effort to make America more self-sufficient. We shouldn't be getting a lot of our trade from countries like China and the UK who censors and arrests people for criticizing their government. And we shouldn't be trading with countries that are also against America's ideals like Iran, North Korea, etc. If it was up to me, we wouldn't be trading with any of these countries that are ruled by these far left globalists who persecute and censor people. We wouldn't be working with France's current government. We wouldn't be working with Germany's government. We wouldn't be working with the UK for sure. And that's because their treatment of their citizens is not in accordance with the American ideals of freedom of speech and closed borders. I think so. If I had to predict right now, I think these tariffs, I think all these countries are going to cave into America's demands, except for countries that are really, really against this, like China. China's going to have a hard time with this because America is their leading trading partner. And they're going to have to try to find other trading partners. I think Canada will eventually cave just because of the fact that they don't have much to offer outside of North America. They've always been dependent on American trade and American defense to survive as a nation. And as you could look at the map, most of their population center is distributed very closely to the American border. So I think Canada will cave. I think the EU will eventually cave if they haven't already by the time I've uploaded this video. China is going to be negatively impacted by this. I think that the economic downturn that we're facing right now with the stock markets, I think that's going to go away within the next couple of weeks, if not months. And I think that all is going to be normal and right in the world, for the most part, pretty soon. Again, I don't always agree with what Donald Trump does, as you've probably seen with the last couple of uploads. But I do love what he's doing with the tariffs by demanding free and fair trade with all the countries that America deals with. America is in this place of world hegemon, and we shouldn't be getting screwed over by our trade deals. We need better trade deals that mutually benefit us and our allies. And if we're not getting that, then we need to cut ties. But please tell me what you think, and if you've liked today's briefing, please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time, this has been the Student Theologian.